All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Coffee and Questions podcast. I could not be more excited about this episode. And for those of you guys who know me, you know that I really believe that God does what God is going to do, and He puts really special people in your life at random times, and usually it's the perfect timing. And this gentleman, if you guys don't know him, honestly, it's your loss, but I also can't wait to introduce you to him. But I am so stoked to have none other than Neal Foard here, longtime creative director in New York, LA, Hong Kong, all of it. And the other piece that I want to talk about with Neal, for those of you guys who are new to this gentleman, is if you guys have ever heard of the 10,000 hour rule, this guy has that thing on lock, right? He has done way more than 10,000 hours in his field of study. And not just persuasion, but storytelling and brand building and just all of it. And I can't wait to have this amazing conversation. So Neal, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's wonderful to be on with you. And for the benefit of anybody that can see us right now, you can find me on social media via the spelling of my name because it's unusual, Nealfoard. And that way you can track me down and you'll find that I have a lot of stories that I post online.
I love it. Well, you have so much knowledge in this space, and I could not think of a more timely time, in my opinion,
Mm,
to do this interview based off of what I really feel like the social media space, especially, is desperately lacking. Um,
mm.
Differentiation is a big word in my world, and you're no stranger to being able to help people find that. So, before we get into all of the weeds of all of this, will you just tell people a little bit about your 30 years of experience? What did you do in all of that time? How did that ultimately lead to the storytelling course that you now have out?
Yeah.
And what have you been up to?
Well, so a little bit of background, which is that I used to be a copywriter in advertising. I came from the creative end of the business. And the very principal lesson in advertising is the way you present something changes its value. So, for example, I don't know if you've ever heard of this place called Vancouver Island in Canada, but Vancouver Island is one of these places that's just stunningly beautiful in summer, but you cannot go there for about 5 months of the year because of the horizontal rains and the awful weather and the cold. It's terrible. So, what happened for a lot of the hotels and a lot of the tourist destinations was that they had to shut the place down until they came up with this idea. They called it storm watching. And the whole real idea was it was so that couples could go there and find a cozy little cabin and do nothing but sit around the fire and drink hot chocolate and be romantic. And so they would supply them with all of the stuff that they needed in order to feel warm and cozy in the worst months of the year. Have you ever had that experience, Michelle, where when it's just awful rain outside, you nevertheless feel really good inside because you've got your cocoa and so forth? Well, that ability to just change the frame was what made it valuable during the worst months of the year. And what was once a bug, which is during that time of the year, the Wi-Fi is awful, became a feature because if you can't go on Wi-Fi, you just have to be with each other. And so there you go. That was my stock in trade, was trying to come up with ways that you could change someone's perception of the value of something just by what you said about it. And in advertising, creative people, like everybody else, thought that the merits of their idea would be enough to sell it. And I'm sorry, but it just isn't. People don't know a good idea when they see it. It can be staring them right in the face, and they don't realize it's a great idea. So you have to sell it to them. You have to present it in such a way that they get it. And there is no more persuasive way of using language than through stories. I can spout details and data at you all day, and you will not remember it. But I can tell you a story and you'll remember it for years. But good example, you probably have not heard the story of Little Red Riding Hood in about 15 years. And I'll bet you could tell it to me, you know? And it's the same for David and Goliath and any of the other parables. You just hear it once, got it. That's the way the human mind works. Our operating system, the way we understand everything, is stories. That's how we organize the way that we perceive the world and how we view our role in it. And from 30 years in advertising, doing that as a profession and making thousands and thousands and thousands of presentations, I kind of created a little rule book of what makes a great story and how to come up with them. And that's the course that I teach, Storyfire.
Such a good introduction to this episode. Honestly, we do not have enough time. I guarantee it. And time that we have together right now.
I'll come back. I'll come
to
back.
get through everything. So there will be a part 2, guys. I'm just going to go ahead and say that right now. And we're only like 5 minutes in, so gear up. But the thing that I'm really eager to speak with you on is in my world, and for those people who are listening to this, I have a lot of regulars that come back all the time. I have lots of people that will say to me, Michelle, you're so consistent in your messaging. And that's a really good thing to hear. But what I am excited for you to kind of do, in my opinion, is see or show how when we tell a story about what we do on the personal side, right? Meaning, like, I'll use Sarah as an example. She'll probably listen to this and love this, but I have a client, Sarah, who is a diehard plant lady, loves plants, has a million of them. We've created a ton of content around plants, right? And how we can use this thing, this inanimate object, as part of how she tells a story about buying or selling real estate and how this plant can affect that. So what I love about this story is it relates so much to what I feel like is really relevant and important with Instagram and just social media in general. And it's how we tell a story. And I think that there's something very important about this conversation right now, specifically because in my world, I really feel like there is a lot of R&Ding happening, right? A lot of rip off and duplicating, doing what other people are doing. And because so-and-so is doing it, I feel like I should do it. And that ties into what I believe is the biggest weakness, if you will, for people and their social media right now, is that there's no differentiator. Like, why are you any different than someone else? And I think that that ties into what you do just so beautifully, right? And even telling the story you just told about this crazy place in the middle of nowhere, Canada, where like most of the time you don't want to go there, but you make it, or how you reframe that made it so I want to go there. Like, I want to look it up and I want to go. So what would you speak into someone about if they're in that rip off and duplicate space where they're really just kind of doing what everybody else is posting?
Yeah. So two things at work. You're putting your finger on something incredibly significant for anybody who's creating content. One is differentiation, but the other is authenticity and genuineness. Okay. So, I teach storytelling to C-suite executives. That's sort of been my bread and butter for a long time, is a chairman of the board has to go on an earnings call, or they're going to do a company-wide meeting. A CFO has to introduce the figures and chart a course for how they're going to achieve and get where they want to go. Do you know the thing that I have to coach the most on is being themselves? That's the most difficult thing because, Michelle, you can imagine they've spent a career playing a role, right? And they become this kind of automaton that is meant to reflect complete confidence, total perfection. I don't make mistakes. And if they do make a mistake, they don't say I effed up. They go, mistakes were made, right? They don't accept ownership of it because they're afraid that will show a chink in the armor. So what I would say to any of your guests and listeners is authenticity has a kind of gravitational pull that falsity does not have. When you detect that somebody is being fake, or that they are trying to shave the edges off things, or they're trying to sanitize, they're trying to make themselves look better than they are, or they're trying to distance themselves from a mistake they've made, it's repellent. It's repulsive. Have you heard the term uncanny valley, which is it's the phenomenon that occurs when you draw a cartoon of a dog, it's fine. Everybody understands what it is. And then you make the cartoon much, much more skilled, still good. There is a point where you render it with such exactness, but not quite all the way to exact. And people find themselves repulsed, especially with human faces. When something is almost real, but not real, it's repulsive. But as soon as it then crosses over into real, then it becomes attractive again. Well, when you are fake in the world, when you're imitating somebody else's content and style because you're hoping for clicks or hits or so forth, you're in the uncanny valley. People actually, they don't find it attractive. They find it repulsive, or the wrong people find it attractive. they're not gravitating towards you. You're going to, if you find yourself a following and you're not being yourself, you're going to have to play that role for the rest of your life. It's, imagine a dating scenario where you like someone very much, but you have, because of your fear of being your true self, you're on your best behavior and you're playing this kind of fake version of yourself. If eventually they find that attractive and they want to marry you, you're going to have to play that role for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's gonna be a
Right? You're
hard
going to
life.
have to actually, right? That's going to be tough. It's going to be fatiguing. And then eventually you're going to show your real self. You're going to be terrified that that's not going to be attractive to that person. It's such a sad phenomenon that CEOs, especially, feel as though they have to play a role rather than just being their normal, regular self, which is often plenty. I've met so many CEOs that if they really were themselves, they would be the best version of themselves, just being authentic and saying, these are my values, this is what I believe in. But let's go to the, like I say, there's this sort of dance between authentic, right, and then really
Differentiate.
putting your best foot forward,
Yeah.
or differentiating, right, and unique. Well, this is where values are what distinguish you, like the things you believe in, the things that you find worth celebrating. What I would suggest to any of your listeners and followers is just find the stuff that turns you on. Just find the things that you get excited about, the things you want to celebrate. I personally don't like to complain in a public way. I don't believe that complaining gets you anywhere. I think it does. Oftentimes, when we complain about something, we're not fully aware of the challenges and difficulties of what it takes to do something well. Somebody who goes in and they're mad about how long their coffee is taking to get to their table. It's like, well, bro, they're busy today. Have you ever been a server? Do you know how hard that is?
Mhm.
And by the way, do you know how hard it is to deal with the general public? Good God.
Yeah.
Oh my
I don't
God.
miss that. Back in the day, I was one.
Right.
Don't miss that.
Man, me too. And I'll tell you, so anybody who is impatient or wants to complain about something, they're often not taking into account the experience of the person trying to do their level best to serve you. So what I would suggest is the way to differentiate yourself is through the things you celebrate, through the things you enjoy and are passionate about. And I'll give you a great example. I love Delta Airlines. Right? I know it's an airline and they're not paying me, trust me. They're not paying me to celebrate them.
Could be.
But I love Delta Airlines because why? Because the flight people take pride in their airline. They like working for Delta. At least that's been my experience. And they must be doing something right at a management level if the people that work there like working there and like working for them. I, as a passenger, see that, and now I'm proud to fly them because their staff is proud to be part of it. There is gravitational pull to a certain kind of positivity, belief. And I have to tell you a story that I have not yet filmed, but I'm going to film it tonight because I was talking to a friend about how he and his wife have been married for almost 40 years. And I asked, well, how is it that my father was very anti getting married. And even though my parents were married forever, and I happened to mention that to this guy, and he said, yeah, my dad was very, very anti-marriage too. And I said, well, what was it like when you told him you were going to get married? And he goes, I have to tell you the whole story. Okay. So he was a creative director in an advertising agency, and he was working with a producer who was a woman. The producers are the people that keep everything on schedule. They keep everything on budget. They don't take any crap from anyone because they got to keep this ship afloat and heading for port. And he and this producer were not dating or anything even remotely like it. He'd never thought of her romantically, nor she him. And then one day they were in an airport where the connecting flight, they were going to miss their flight. It was so close, it looked like they weren't going to make it. And she said to him, oh, we're going to make that flight. And he goes, I don't know, it's going to be close. And she says, even if we have to run the length of this airport, we are going to make it. And he says, well, what about our bags? And she goes, oh, for God's sake, you didn't check a bag, did he? Goes, no, and I thought you did. And she goes, no, man, I travel light. So she's got this like one carry-on as her bag. And then she says, when that door opens, I want you to be, I want the theme song in your head to be the theme from Rocky. I
Mm.
want you to be playing that music in your head. And we are going to run at full speed across this airport to get to that gate. Do you understand me? And he goes, I'm on it. Okay, so the gates open. And you know how at the beginning of the Rocky theme, it's got that trumpet fanfare. So it'll go da 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 da, and then it goes ba ba ba. Okay, so he says and the theme was going through my head. The doors opened right on that note, and we were at a full run across that airport. And I kept looking back, expecting her to be losing distance, and she was right there at my elbow the whole way. And he goes, and we made that flight. And I mean, we barely made it, but we made it. And he goes, Neal, literally, I was looking at that woman, and I was thinking, it would be very awkward of me to propose to you now, but I am going to propose to you at some point. He said, not because I was impressed by her, but because she made me a better person. She made me live up to, you know, a new standard for myself. We're gonna make it. And that to me that is the vibe of positivity that you want to send to your listeners so that when they're listening to you, they are the better version of themselves. And I think that anybody that's looking to differentiate, show me how you can do that.
I love this. All I can think about is I have to fly in the next 2 weeks. So I'm thinking to myself, I am Rocky song in my AirPods. I will not miss my connection flight. No question. To be honest, I don't think I actually have ever missed a flight now that I'm listening to that and thinking about it. But if there ever is a time or every time I'm going to get close, I know what theme song needs to be in my AirPods.
There's something really delicious about the idea of, I'm not going to be mad. I'm not going to complain. All that's going to happen is I'm going to have this music in my head, and I'm going to be that person that makes this flight. And I'll say something else, Michelle, which is, I didn't think to ask him, but I should have. And it would have been, what if you hadn't made that flight? And here's what I'm going to guess he would have said. You ready? He would have said, fantastic, because that was like, then we would be stuck in that city together. Like, and who knows where that might have gone.
Oh my gosh. Well, hold on. I have to know, did they actually get married? Is that's the couple?
Oh yeah. Yeah. They were married like 40 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. That's how he decided. And the part I've left out of the story, but is really important is, because he said his father was very anti-marriage. I said, well, how did he take it? How did you work yourself up to telling him? And he goes, that was the point, was I didn't care what he thought. At that point, I didn't care what he thought. And I thought, oh, wow, she really did make you a better person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
for sure. Like, to be able to say that.
On that day, right. I didn't care what my father thought. And so, that's major. So there you go.
Well, if I have an idea in my head as far as how this directly applies to something I was very recently talking to someone about and one of the core pillars of content that I teach in my world is called value series. So I'll give you the same fast rundown that I would tell anyone listening who isn't a client or a student of mine. And what a value series is one topic divided into 5 sub questions. Each of those 5 sub questions is designed to be a video of 40 to 60 seconds that we use as a reel on Instagram. Now, in the real estate space, in the mortgage space, both for that matter, irrelevant where you fall right now. Hell, you could be watching this and run a dentist office and it would still land the same way. The biggest thing that I teach in the value series is, okay, so if you want to say that you specialize in VA loans, right? How do we talk about VA loans in a way that doesn't make you a talking head behind a desk like every other mortgage professional talking about VA loans, right? And how can we tell a story about something that you enjoy personally? And so again, you and I were talking offline about the Venn diagram concept, right? So on one side you have passions, and then on the other side of it, you have your expertise or your credibility as far as what you specialize in. And then the intersection of the two is your content. And I had a client very recently who was this gentleman specialized in VA loans. And we were talking about, okay, well, let's talk about the other side of the circle, right? What makes you you? Who are you outside of the real estate and mortgage space? Mind you, he's been in the mortgage space for 20 plus years. So he's certainly been doing it for quite some time. And the very first thing he said to me, he goes, well, Michelle, all I do is work. I really don't have time for passion projects. And I was like, I don't believe you. So we ended up digging in a little bit. And what we came out with, and this is where I think you're going to have a field day with this, but what we came up with was he's a DIY guy. He loves doing projects at home. His wife doesn't love it so much, but he constantly is finding new projects to do around the house, whether that's outside or inside, whether that's a retaining wall, it doesn't matter, anything, all of it. Right. And I said, well, what's the most recent project that you've done? He said, well, I actually built a retaining wall off of our back deck around like the concrete slab that we are putting lights into to kind of make like a fun decorative space outside. And I was like, right there, then and there, that's what the analogy is that we have to come up with. We have to find symbolism in the process of building a retaining wall. Yeah. And we have to talk about mortgages in that. And the guy looked at me and he was like, I don't know whether or not to think that you're brilliant or whether or not to think that you're absolutely batshit crazy, because how am I going to do that? Right. And that was the power of this concept, because we ended up going to ChatGPT. We asked ChatGPT, can you create an analogy between building a retaining wall and how a buyer should look at
did you really use AI for
but it worked, right? Like it gave us a concept and then we talked through the concept and we used what ChatGPT gave us as a springboard into, okay, now we can build an entire series around this. So ChatGPT by no means was like face value. We're not just going to take it and use that, right? But it gave us the springboard to, there it is. Now let's go put our brains together and build the rest of it out. But this gentleman literally is building a value series around VA loans and the concept, or I'm sorry, not VA loans, but the concept of how to look at your mortgage payment as a buyer to determine like what are you willing to pay on a monthly basis and how to understand where you would feel comfortable, and tying that into the concept of a retaining wall. Like I think it's absolutely insanely awesome, but where does your brain go with that as far as like storytelling and being able to put your passions into your content? And what would you say to that gentleman if he's going to build a story about retaining walls and mortgage payments?
Yeah. Well, I can't tell you about the mortgage payments. What I can say is that the approach I would take is to say everybody's favorite subject is themselves. And in this case, the VA loan is meant for a certain kind of person, obviously a veteran.
Yep.
And veterans earned the right to that loan through the sacrifice that they were willing to make and that they made. Being in the service is not easy. I mean, sleeplessness, demands from when you get a commanding officer that you don't like, there's ain't nothing you can do about it. That, if you have a job where you don't like the boss, you can quit. You are not quitting the military. You signed on. Okay. The approach I would take is to say, this is something that is really good for veterans, and they earned it. You earned the right to this special status. And the story I would tell are some of the things you have to put up with in the service, and create a bridge between somebody who wants to help them with the VA loan and that same person who understands you, the person who's going to take advantage of it, like the struggle that you went through, the sacrifice you made, the funny things about it. So let's go back to your Venn diagram. This is the service that I can help you with. And you are the person who earned the right to use that service. And the intersection is the respect that I have for you for having earned the right. There's a reason I do this. I enjoy my customers in a way most people can't. I have a respect for my customers in a way most people don't. And that way you can pay respect to the people you're talking to and demonstrate a certain affection for them. And, there's a story that I tell, or there's a principle that I do. Michelle, maybe you've seen it, where I was talking about, I was in this restaurant and this was at the beginning of the year. And so I was sort of sitting there and I was thinking about the new year, and I overheard this woman talking to a friend, and she was talking about her ex-husband, and she referred to him as a dog. And I laughed to myself and I go, I know you don't mean that as a compliment. I think you mean that as a dig. But the truth is, dogs are awesome. And and the funny thing about dogs is if you really everybody loves dogs, but if you objectively look at them, you go, well, yeah, but they have their drawbacks. I mean, you have to walk them constantly. You have to pick up their poop. You have to, they shed on everything. And when they're young, they chew on everything and they pee everywhere. And, if you go out of town, you have to board them and they cost a fortune at the vet. And God help you if they bite someone. So my question to anybody that has dogs is, why do people bother? Why do people love dogs so much? And the reason is because dogs love you first. They they never look at you and wonder if they could have done better. They
It's true.
they are just happy to see you around, and if you are ever in danger, they will not think twice about their own safety. They will just hurl themselves. Have you ever noticed the way a small dog will actually go after somebody that's like threatening you?
Hmm.
And clearly they're giving away 50 pounds, but they don't care because they think you're worth saving. You're part of their pack. Okay, people love dogs because dogs love them first.
Yep.
If somebody specializes in VA loans, you need to be the person who loves veterans, who respects them, who wants to help them, who gets a charge out of this beyond the money,
Mm.
who cannot wait to see you succeed and get what's coming to you in a good way.
Yep.
That's where I would go, because then what happens is you become synonymous with a friend in the business.
Yeah, and I think that's
Like,
the interesting part though, which I want to piggyback off of because you become a friend in the business. But here's where I feel like the problem arises, which is in order to, or I shouldn't say in order to, how it's been told in the past, right? So if you have that loan officer who maybe they were in the service, which is the example we're using, right? Which is a lot of them. Like a lot of people get into doing VA loans or doing loans in general and specializing in VA
because
because
they were,
of their own experience, right?
yeah,
Um, but here's the problem, in my opinion, is when they go to tell the story, they don't tell the story well, right? They stand behind a desk with a talking head and a suit on, or a nice button down shirt, whatever it might be, and they talk about VA loans, and they don't tell a story with analogies and symbolism and something that I, as the person consuming the content, am going to stop and say, whoa, right? Or where are you going with this, Neal? Like, out of just, you're standing on an airstrip in the middle of nowhere. Like, where are you going with? Like, so being, and my point in saying that is we have to teach the people that are trying to tell these types of stories how to tell the story better, right? And also
yeah,
how to frame the story so that if I'm looking at Instagram and you get 7 seconds, which is the average watch time of a reel, guys, total, right? So it's very fast and very low in comparison to your full 40 seconds or 60 seconds or whatever it is that you recorded. So how do you make that first 7 seconds matter enough to someone that they're going to say, well, you're my person. Like I know a lot of people that specialize in VA loans, but you're my person. Right. And I can speak from very personal experience on this, but go ahead, Neal.
I have a tip for that. So there's a phrase they say, if you want to get rich, don't sell vitamins, sell painkillers. And the reason being that when you're selling vitamins, you have to sell a long game. Like, you eventually want to stay healthy. But when you're selling painkillers, whoever is in pain at that moment, they'll pay a lot of money right now.
Mm-hmm.
And because they want their suffering to stop. There was a guy, he was a very famous jewelry store owner in Dallas. And he was a very small player, but courtesy of this guy who was his sort of radio specialist, the guy turned him into a real personality, a kind of friend in the diamond business. And this is the kind of message he used to say. He would say his name and he would say, fellas, if you're shopping for an engagement ring, uh, uh, you know, it's actually possible she might say no. She, you might ask her to marry, she might say no. And then you're thinking, what the heck am I going to do with this engagement ring, that I bought? Well, I just wanted to let you know that if you buy it from me, no harm, no foul. Bring it on back and I'll take care of you. We'll I'll give you your full refund. There's no restocking fee here, okay? Because you're hurting bad enough as it is. You don't need me to pile on. And by the way, if that did happen to you, uh, come see me about the next one because we'll make sure that the next one's extra special and I'll make sure you get a good deal on it. And
Make sure you
so
get a
what he
yes
was
the second
doing,
time.
yeah, yeah. But what he was able to do is he was able to channel the sort of anxieties and pains and understanding of the people that were buying the product. Now, in the case of if we stay on the VA loan thing, for example, one of the greatest things, one of the big favors you can do for your clientele is, you're an expert, so you can answer the questions they didn't know to ask.
Mm-hmm.
You can often say, look, here are the challenges you're probably going to face or you might be facing. Let me dig into one of those and solve that problem for you. And generally speaking, it's the best policy is to talk about a real case where you were able to help somebody that had that problem. So, most of the time, that 7-second thing you were talking about, as soon as people know it's a story, if you can hook them with this is a story about somebody who faced a challenge, you'll get a greater chance that they will hook on.
Mm-hmm.
Information, bullet points, it's very, very hard to observe those, but the beauty of storytelling is that you can remember it for a long time. And there's got to be probably 20, 30 things that a VA loan specialist is able to tell somebody applying for a VA loan that here's what I would want to know if I was doing it the first time.
Let's pause there for a second because you just said that, and you also said it in the very beginning of this episode too. I remember that exact phrase, right? And you used the Robin Hood example. You said, "I bet you haven't heard the
Yeah.
Robin Hood story in 20 years, but you could, or you would know it if you heard it." Type,
Yeah.
right? Well,
Or
let's think
you'd certainly be able to describe the broad strokes.
exactly,
Sure.
like at
Yeah.
least to some extent, right? But here's the thing,
Yeah.
that's my point right there. And if you guys don't hear a single other thing that Neal and I say, it's right here. It's the storytelling aspect of how we share our value is the difference and is the differentiator that's going to make someone actually stop and watch our video. And it's also the same thing that's going to make someone come back to that video if they can't remember our names, or if they can't remember what our Instagram handle is. They might at least remember the video and be able to look that up, right? Because they might remember the story that you told in the video. So they may Google, or on Instagram search reel about this or whatever it is, insert the descriptor word. But that's one thing. Your content does this super well. And actually how I met you, Neal, was through a mutual friend that we've done some work for now together. Not together, but for him, both you and I separately. Hopefully the together piece of that changes soon. But the thing that connected us was this individual telling us about each other, right? I then go to your account and I'm looking at your Instagram and I'm listening to all of these reels about all these different stories that you're telling. And I remember those stories. I don't necessarily even remember your name. I mean, I do now, right? But at the initial time I didn't, right? But I remembered the story. The prisoner story, I think, was one of the examples that he gave me to go look up when it came to you. But my point in that is when I build content, even for myself, right? The most important thing is how can I tell a story about something related to Instagram marketing, Instagram prospecting, how to build your presence without being present in a way that someone will know it was me, even if they don't remember exactly what I said. They'll remember the way I framed it, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, that was Michelle." Like they'll just know, right? And I probably get 5, 6, 7 calls a week now where people are like, "Oh, I remember the story that you told, but I don't remember exactly like what I'm supposed to do." But they'll remember the story.
Yeah. Yeah. Stories stick to, or they come in through a different part of the mind. There literally are two different ways you store memories. One is the hippocampus. That's things like facts, like, oh, that you can get 20% off of this, or I have to watch out for that in my diet. But the other part of the brain where memories come in, or memories are formed, is the emotional memories. Those are triggered by the amygdala, which is in the limbic part of the mind. Have you ever, for example, the example I always use is, have you ever been involved with somebody that you knew was not good for you, but you couldn't stop yourself?
Yep.
And the reason is that you, right? The reason is that your limbic mind your emotional mind, the one that the part of your brain that processes trust and love and jealousy and, anger and so forth, that absolutely overrides your neocortex, the logical deductive part of your mind. And we often make decisions emotionally and then justify it with our big brain rather than actually make the decisions with our neocortex. And so what stories do is they sufficiently trigger the emotions that it makes you feel something. And this is, again, another reason why I say you've got to keep it positive. You have to stay on the pain killing side of things, not the anxiety creating side.
Mhm.
If you stay on the pain killing side, there's this wonderful quote from Maya Angelou where she says there people would just not remember what you said, and frequently they will not remember what you did, but they will always remember how you made them feel.
Yes.
And this is why dogs are so beloved.
Mhm.
Dogs make people feel appreciated and seen and loved. And in exchange, people love their dogs more than they love other humans. They
True.
just find dogs deserving. So, under these circumstances, when you are coming up with the content and you are telling a story, the story needs to be uplifting. It needs to be about somebody who succeeded. And even if the story was about what happened to somebody because they didn't do something, you want to end on it, but let's not let that happen to you. You can, if you do this or you come see me, I'll make sure that doesn't happen to you. It's a little bit like, she might say no when you ask her to marry you.
You still gotta ask
She might
anyway.
say no, but the good news is, yeah, it won't cost you anything from me. That's for sure.
Oh my gosh.
And
Is this Shaneco? Is that the name of the jewelry company you're referring to?
it might have been.
Because Shaneco always
I
says
don't know.
my wedding ring for my husband is actually from Shaneco. And the reason I remember this literally is the story of the Shane Company brand. And literally the radio ads say,
Oh,
like, you've got a friend in the diamond business. And so
okay.
I'm like, when
It's
you said that,
possible.
I was like, it's got to be Shaneco. And what's even funny about that, and most people probably don't even know this, but my husband, when he bought my ring at Shane Company, we were actually already legally married. Like, we had gotten married at the courthouse, and he proposed
Mm.
with nothing. Of course, said, yeah, that's a whole story, right, for us for another day.
Yeah.
But when he walked into Shane Company, the immediate words out of the lady's mouth that he was meeting with for his appointment was, well, what app did you meet your wife on? Right? Because that was the perception of the world, was like everybody met on an app. It was eHarmony, or it was what, I don't even know the name of them. Match is that one, I think, but like whatever.
Match.com. Yeah.
And then there's a whole bunch of ones now, like for the younger generation, but which, that's sad that I don't even know the name. Maybe that's a good thing.
How old are you?
But
You say younger generation. You look like you're 26.
I will be 34 in a month.
Young.
But I just don't
Okay.
even,
Well,
I don't even
you're
know the names of the apps. Like, I just truly don't, because I've honestly
younger
never been on
generation.
them. But the thing that was funny about that is my husband, when she asked that question, she goes, oh, we didn't actually meet on an app. And the lady's like, what? Like, she was like shocked. And he was like, we actually met at the gym. Like, we were working out and we met at the gym. And so every time I came in to get my ring cleaned for the entire rest of the time that my husband and I lived in Arizona, that lady, every time, as soon as I walked in, she knew that I was that girl. And it was like, just the way that my husband told the story, right? She was something that she never forgot. And I just think that that's the power of storytelling, in that sense of even just how he said it made her not forget it, But
You have to show me your hands. Go like that. Are you left-handed or right-handed?
right-handed.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm looking at this row of calluses here. I'm going,
Yeah.
you must be able to lift like a mofo, because those calluses look like squat bar deadlift calluses.
Yeah, between
Are
squatting and clean and jerks and snatches and all of the Olympic lifts, I touch a barbell
are
a few
you CrossFit, or are you just strong as Polish farm girl?
times. Definitely CrossFit. I also was an Olympic lifter,
Okay.
which is actually how my husband and I met. Was in the Olympic weightlifting gym. But
Okay.
funny
I
enough,
thought I saw some
yeah,
guns there when you held up your arm. I thought, oh man, look at that bicep.
I also swam for 22 years, so that certainly adds to that, to the frame. But the fitness has not gone away on me for sure. I've maintained
Yeah.
it throughout postpartum, and if anything, maybe more so. But
Right
um,
on.
Neal, for sake of time, I want to ask just one more really important question that's on my heart, because I think our audience is struggling really constantly with the same kind of three big things, right? What to post, what to say, and then ultimately how do they make it convert, right? Those are the three big things that I hear literally on a daily basis. And the one that I want to talk about is the convert piece. I think the what to post part, I think we all understand the power of storytelling, and we can certainly get more tactical when we have the opportunity to do maybe even a webinar or something together. But what I want to talk about specifically in those three main things with you is the power of the opportunity to convert, right? So how would you tell someone to use the story, and maybe they crushed it, they did a great video and they're like, that was it, I did exactly what Michelle and Neal said, I told the story, it was positive, it landed, and I weaved in what I do professionally, but now when I post it, how do I make sure that it does something?
Well, I can't claim to be an expert on that. What I can say is that there's a wonderful resource for people to go there specifically. Gary Vaynerchuk,
Yeah, of
who
course.
is quite famous for being early and often to the internet, and he was the one who really, in many ways, wrote the textbook on how to convert storytelling into active business. He's very much about give it away, and just give your content away, and just make it easy for people to find you. Now, what he would do is he would say, as an example, if you have a piece of content that among your many pieces of content is the big performer, then you already know that people like that one. Therefore, what you should do is run that one with an aggressive call to action at the end, because you are then attaching your call to action, your offer, your promise of how to reach you and so forth. You're attaching it to something that you already know is a winner.
Yeah.
And that in many ways, this is the art form of generating content. Half of the reason for doing it is to see if you can find something that strikes a nerve. And then once you do, you have a pre-tested piece of advertising creative on which you can attach your offer. That's a kind of blocking and tackling from Gary Vee. Given that we all now have the perplexity.ai and we've got ChatGPT, what you can do is you can literally put into those things, hey, what's the best way to use social media and storytelling in order to convert offers? And it will come up with something. And personally, I like Perplexity as the AI engine, because what Perplexity does is it doesn't just feed you the answer. It shows you the citations of where it got its information. And then you can dig down into those articles. And I find that, oh, I love the experience, by the way, because of that. So I'll use Perplexity and I'll go on there and I'll ask it a question about how can I have high quality restaurant style signs made for a backyard barbecue? And then, it'll give me all this stuff. And then it'll give me these citations, and I'll wind up going to the article on House and Garden and so forth. It's a little bit like a power librarian, like a librarian who could tell you exactly where to go in the library
It's like
to find the
ChatGPT
answers
and
to.
Wikipedia had a baby.
Yeah, that's a brilliant way of putting it. Yeah, exactly. So I wish I could be more value to you when it came to your listeners and viewers, but I will say that when you use AI to search out the answer to that question, you're going to get the nice step-by-step on how to do that. I want to reinforce for my part that storytelling is the art of explaining your personal journey in such a way that people recognize you as a fellow human being and not just somebody who's in it for business. You have probably had the experience, Michelle, of somebody reaches out to you on LinkedIn and they want to connect. And so you go, oh, okay, let's connect. Boom. And the second you've hit the connect button, there is a text where they're trying to sell you something.
Absolutely. It's the
And
worst sales rep
it's
platform
like
ever.
it's like the Jack Nicholson character in The Shining, cracking the door open with an axe and going, "Here's Johnny," and you just go, "Wow, I'm so," immediately disconnect from that person. They
Absolutely.
don't want a relationship. They look at you the way that a cattle rancher looks at cows. They don't see another human being. They see a sheep to be fleeced. They see a cow to be turned into meat. And that to me is the exact opposite of what I want to do. My job, as I see it, as a storyteller is to make as much human connection as possible so
I
that
love
people
that.
don't feel lonely in the world. They feel like somebody can help them or answer questions, or if nothing else, just reassure them that, we're not all bad.
Well, but telling the story and being a good storyteller creates the connection that we as humans desire so badly. And that
Yeah, yeah, I
really,
agree.
in theory, is what social media was designed for initially, right? Was designed to be a way for two people to connect without having to be physically with one another. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, maybe that's a whole nother show right there too. But the thing that is interesting about this is I talked about this not long ago, actually, but I'm a very high DI on the disc profile. So when, if you've ever done that, most people would not be
I-
shocked by hearing me say that. But being a high D means I'm a driver, right? I'm a big, strong personality. I'm the type of person that, like, even if I don't understand something, I'm just going to face plant into it and try to figure it out and then ultimately come back out on the other side. Typically, I end up being really confident in uncomfortable situations because I kind of force myself to feel that way so that I don't feel the anxiety that I'm actually feeling on the inside. But the thing that is interesting about my big personality is it's actually taught me to do what you just said, right? To show up super authentically and to share the personal, authentic moments and the hard shit, quite like quote unquote, that has gone on in my life because it makes me more approachable to the person who might feel intimidated by that big personality, right? So if
mm,
all I posted was these videos of me talking and crushing my love lane of what I do for a living. And I didn't tell any of the personal stories or share any of the stuff about postpartum depression and suicide and all these things that are a big part of my life, right? Then all of a sudden I'm just this really big intimidating factor or intimidating head right on the screen. But
mm.
to tell that story then creates people feeling like, oh, well, if she can do it and she's been through that, then so can I, right? And that's where that hope aspect comes into play.
So I just wanted, for the benefit of your audience, um, when you are telling a story, do not make yourself the hero of the story. Don't do that. Don't talk about how wonderful you are. On social media, you know how people are prone to like showing off their fancy vacations and showing off their new acquisitions and bragging about their cars and their fancy vacations. Do you really think, for those of you who are doing that, what do you think is the emotional reaction of the people seeing it? Do you think they're thinking, what a wonderful aspirational figure? I want to be more like them. Gee, aren't they great? You know what? They're not thinking that. I promise you. I promise you. The F word is somewhere in what they really think. And they're not looking up at you on your little pedestal and going, wow, you're amazing. What they're doing is they're giving you the side eye and they're going, you know what? Go F yourself, you and
Mm.
your fancy car. I have no interest in helping you at all
Helping you
because
make
all you're
more
doing,
money because
yeah,
all you
yeah,
care about is spending the money that you're making for me to make yourself look better.
yeah. And so that's the first thing is don't do that because you're not getting the reaction you think from that. The second thing is your job isn't to go out there and make everybody jealous. That's not your job. Your job as a human being is to make sure that you help other human beings, make them feel good about the journey and don't feel alone and don't feel like they're less than. Try to support people, put a little wind under their wings. And if you do tell a story and it happens that you're the hero, just pretend somebody else is the hero. Make it someone else, because then they're standing next to you watching the event like a colleague, like a friend, like a fellow human being who's on the same journey. And they're not looking at you jealously. They're looking at you as somebody else who understands and admires things. And so there you go. I just wanted to get that editorial off my chest.
No, it's so good. And it's both of those parts, honestly, that's going to go in the show notes because I think it's important. You're not the hero. You shouldn't be the hero of the stories that you're telling because it's about the person. It's about the person you're trying to connect with and how can you make them feel heard and seen
Yeah.
and felt. And what's perfect about that is the prospecting side, which is another conversation and my specialty, right, of the active outbound prospecting piece. When you outbound prospect, you should never start the conversation about yourself ever. It's about them. And the very first
Right.
piece to any
Right.
message is acknowledgement. Make sure you are acknowledging what the individual that you're commenting on their content about or you're replying to their stories. It's about them. right? It's not about us. And if you do that,
Yeah.
you're
The,
obviously going to be able to tell, and that person on the receiving end is going to feel that. It's so
there you
good.
go. It's about them.
So good. It's about them. We'll say that 5 more
Well, back at you.
times. It's about them.
And you
Um,
know what? It would be worth repeating it. It really, they should have that mantra going through their head, which is, I'm there to solve somebody's problem today. I'm here to alleviate some of their pain today. What could I tell them that I wish I'd known 10 years ago that can save them some time and make them feel like they've got a friend here? You know, all of those things are, those are going to be, you're going to be feel better yourself for telling that story. You're going to feel like, okay, I've contributed today, and I didn't do it for self-aggrandizement and so that everybody would think of me. Because anybody who brags out in the world, oh brother, you're not getting the result you think you're getting.
Definitely
You're
not.
not.
Yeah. Well, Neal, quickly, will you tell us about Storyfire and what Storyfire mean, or like what that would mean for someone
Yeah.
listening to this, if that would make sense for them and why they should plug in?
Yeah. So Storyfire is a multi module. It's like 23 modules of video instruction and exercises that you take at your own pace. It's an online course in storytelling. And essentially, it is the encapsulated and distilled knowledge of 30 years in advertising, doing two things at the same time. One, making thousands of presentations to clients in the hope that I can get them to buy the concepts. And the second thing, and more importantly, is designing messaging that produces a result on behalf of big brands. In 30 years of advertising, I learned so many lessons from brands like Anheuser-Busch and Nike and Nokia and Sony and Heineken. And you know what you find out is the great brands don't talk about themselves. The great brands tell stories about, they write love letters to their customers. And
I love it.
that to me is, it's one of the philosophies and the lessons that you learn if you take the Storyfire course. It's available at storyfire.net. The name comes from the idea that we sit around the campfire telling stories. So storyfire.net.
Tell better stories, people. Tell better stories, right? That's what this is all
Yeah.
about. And make it about the other people, the people you are trying to serve, the people you are trying to connect with, and talk
Yeah.
about their things, talk about what they're sharing and what they're posting. And it's going to completely dramatically change everything, right? Telling stories and how we produce content. It's not just about, hey, this is how many units I've done, or this is how many, millions of dollars in loan volume I did this year, because that's not about them. That's about you. Right. So a big change and a big shift in how we look at how we produce content. But Neal, thank you so much for coming and being on the show. And just, I honestly feel like we just recorded an hour of two friends just chatting, and that is the best type of show. And I hope my
It
people
is.
feel that.
Thank you for having me on, Michelle. This has been a real pleasure for me. You are an impressive person, and I love your energy.
Thank you.
And so, yeah, good to know you.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you. And for those of you guys listening, if you love this episode, please let Neal and I know. Comment either on the YouTube channel. You can see the micro content on Instagram. And the other most important thing is you can actually download our episode out of Apple or Spotify and leave us a review. Reviews are everything. We're doing super well in the Instagram trending on the charts. So keep us there, please, by continuing to add reviews. And again, of course, if you have any other people like Neal that you think I should interview, send them my way. Thanks, guys, and
Or
we'll
have
see
me
you in the
again.
next episode.